Well, good morning, and thank you for having me back. I mean, I always wonder why people will allow me to come back, but sometimes they do, and it is a wonderful occasion to be here. I do enjoy the opportunity. Ron sent me a note that he said he usually reads to you from the Message Bible, and that's great. I don't have a copy of that, so I had to print it out on a piece of paper, because normally I will read directly from a printed Bible, but since he wanted to use the Message this morning, I will do that. And Romans 8:22 through 25. The difficult times of pain throughout the world are simply birth pains. But it's not only around us, it's within us. The Spirit of God is arousing within us. We're also feeling the birth pains. These sterile and barren bodies of ours are yearning for full deliverance. That is why waiting does not diminish us, any more than waiting diminishes the pregnant mother. We are enlarged in the waiting. We, of course, don't see what is enlarging us, but the longer we wait, the larger we become and the more joyful our expectancy. The reading of God's Word. Well, when Ron asked me to come up here a few weeks ago, it's been probably a month and a half now, I said, are you doing any kind of a series? Do you want something special? And he said, well, here's kind of what would fit in with what I'm doing. And I said, okay, I'll try to come up with a sermon based on that. I'm not a big fan of Romans. It's a tough book to preach out of. It's not easy. And I was struggling mightily to get a sermon written over the last about 3 weeks that I've been working on it, and still only had it about half done yesterday at noon. And my wife said, why don't we go to the movies? I'm like, why not? It can't be, And I don't know how many of you enjoy going to the movies and, spending a whole afternoon in the movie theater. Yeah, there's a few of you that are kind of strange, but, most of us, it's terribly expensive. You're stuck in this room that they have the sound so loud that if they would take the sound deadening stuff off the walls, you could hear it 3, 4, blocks, maybe even miles away. And you're stuck in this room with this stuff reverberating. I turn my hearing aids off and take them out. And then you want some snacks and a medium popcorn and a medium drink. It's $13. I mean, they've got all of 50 cents tied up in it. I just don't understand. But, yesterday was different. We got there early like we normally do, and they didn't have the volume up so loud that it was rolling you out of there. They didn't do 45 minutes of commercials for the upcoming movies, which was really nice because this movie that we went to see is a fairly long movie anyway. How many of you have seen the one about Mr. Rogers, A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood? Tom Hanks is in it and some others. Really, really good movie. I would advise you to go see it, or when it comes out where you can rent it. It's a powerful movie with a lot of good stuff to tell us. And you see, it's really not even about Mr. Rogers. Although it is, but it isn't. It's about this writer. This guy writes for Esquire magazine, and he writes these tough, nasty pieces that nobody, feels like they came out on top when he gets done writing about them. But they're doing this series of, I don't remember what they called it, but it's, series of people that are kind of the top people, the good people, the whatever that they want to honor this year. And they give him the assignment of going and talking to Mr. Rogers for a 400-word puff piece on Mr. Rogers. That's not what this guy does. And his boss looks at him and says, Mr. Rogers is the only one that would allow you to come for an interview. Nobody else would even talk to him. And so he kind of grumbles and moans and goes home and tells the wife he's got to go to Pittsburgh and talk to Mr. Rogers. He doesn't even know who Mr. Rogers is. His wife does. And one of the things she tells him is, don't ruin my childhood. But he gets there, and it's supposed to be an hour-long interview, and it turns out to be about 10 minutes. Is all that there is time for. And, he's frustrated. Nothing is going right. He doesn't want to do this, but he doesn't have enough to do anything with. And he goes back home, and he's like, I don't know what to do. And the next scene is a couple of days later. He's laying there in bed with his wife. It's not quite morning yet, and the phone rings. And she rolls over and answers it, and it's Mr. Rogers on the phone, wanting to give him the opportunity to come and spend the entire day with him. He's got a couple of things to do, and there's some other things that go on. I don't want to ruin the movie for you. I really don't. But it's what I want to tell you is this movie has a lot of things to it about waiting patiently. It has a lot of things about hope. For you see, the reason this guy was so nasty in the way he wrote his articles was because his father had left the family as his mother was dying. Not only had he left the family, but he'd been running around with other women. He'd been doing all sorts of other things that were really, really bad. And it's been several years, and that hatred has only gotten worse. It hasn't gotten better. And Mr. Rogers sets out to help him understand, to help him wait patiently, to help him hope for that end where him and his father can be reconciled. For you see, now his father is dying. And his father has come to realize how bad he screwed up. And I'm going to leave it there so you don't know the ending. You see, Merriam-Webster dictionary defines patiently as in a patient manner, with calmness or without complaint or hurry in spite of delays, difficulties, tedium, etc. Waiting patiently means that we are not trying to hurry the situation we are in, but accepting it and moving forward when we can. Being patient means that we can wait without the stress that comes from our natural urge to be doing something. And I don't know about you guys, but I can't just sit there and do nothing. It just doesn't work. Patience is not my virtue. And I think that's why I do woodworking, is because if you try to hurry the wood, if you try to push it too hard, you'll destroy it. But if you try to be patient with the wood, you can make beautiful, beautiful objects out of it. Even wood that others would throw away can be made into beautiful objects. Well, Merriam-Webster also defines hope as a desire accompanied by expectation of or belief in fulfillment or success or obtainment. Hope is most often thought of as a way of thinking, feeling, and acting that may help a person find the means to live with difficult situations and challenges, no matter how discouraging the future may seem. It's a belief that there might be a remote chance of getting something desired. Well, Dr. Craig Nelson explains that hope is a whole lot more than that. It's more than just that optimistic expectation of success or a better outcome. When we use the word hope, we use it kind of in the negative sense. We're hoping for something that might happen. We're hoping for something that we want to happen, but we're not sure it's going to. In Paul's time, when he was writing the book to Romans, hope had a completely different meaning. You hoped for something you knew was going to happen. You just didn't know when. Biblical hope is not just a desire for something good in the future, but an honest, realistic, confident expectation and desire for something good or a positive outcome in the future to happen because of the promises of God are already in the process of fulfillment. Do you get that? It's a completely different way of looking at hope, isn't it? Hope is not this, we really want something to happen. No. Hope, the way they looked at it, was we know this is going to happen, and we're going to hope that it will happen soon so that we can enjoy that. We can enjoy that expectation. Well, I've learned a lot about waiting patiently for hope over the last few months. My wife has had 4 surgeries since the middle of November. 3 of them related to 2 kidney stones that, if you've ever had kidney stones, she woke up about midnight, didn't wake me up until about 4 in the morning, and she says, "We got to go to the emergency room." I could see the way she was standing. It was exactly the way I was when I had my kidney stone. I said, "You got kidney stones. We got to get there. You're right." And they did surgery that morning to put a stent in because they couldn't remove the stone. It was too big. They had to let the swelling go down and let some of the other things happen. And so they did surgery that morning, and then a week later, we're back at the hospital again to do surgery to take that stent out and break that stone up and take it out. And while they're there, they find another one that's too big to take out. And so 2 weeks later, we're back in again to do surgery to take that second one out. Well, I learned a lot about waiting patiently as, sitting there in the waiting room. But the big one was just 2.5 weeks ago on a Wednesday. She had complete knee replacement surgery on her right knee. Well, that complete knee replacement surgery is scary. I've talked to some of you that have had it, and you have some people that have fantastic, but we've got a lady at church that we go with that had complete knee replacement surgery 3.5 years ago, and she still is having problems. There were all sorts of problems with what has happened. Some of it her fault, some of it just because. And so it's really scary. You see, my wife has arthritis real bad from when she was a 4-year-old and had juvenile arthritis. And so her joints are stiff and swollen and everything. And, so waiting there in the waiting room is tough. I don't know how to wait patiently to begin with. And there's nothing I can do. There really is nothing you can do sitting there in the waiting room. I got lucky. A friend of mine that I hadn't seen in 40 years that lives up north of Hiawatha was down there. His wife was having back surgery. And so we sat there and talked the whole 2.5 hours. Caught up with family and friends and figured out we even had a mutual friend down in Ulysses that, is completely off the subject of what either one of us would have ever done in college. And so it's, that part gave both of us some relief, made that waiting and that hoping a little easier. But you see, there was more to it than that. 25 years ago, my wife had slipped on ice and collapsed the top 1.5 inches of the tibia on that leg. And it was 6 months before she was able to even come close to walking right, and she'd lost a lot of movement. And so there's a lot of difficulty in there. And 2.5 weeks out, I'm very happy to say she has more movement now than she's had in the last 25 years. She's given up the walker and is walking with a cane. She's doing things like going to the movies that even, 4 or 5 weeks ago would have been almost unimaginable because of the pain she was in. The hope and the expectations are much more than what I could have ever hoped for. But you see, Paul, in these scripture, did you notice how he starts? He starts out talking about pain, doesn't he? But it's not just any pain. It's the pain of birth. And guys, I'm sorry, but we have nothing that compares to that. The women in here that are mothers can definitely tell you what is going on, but I had the blessing of being in the room when all 3 of my daughters were born. A blessing beyond imagine. Yeah, there was screaming, and I think there's still claw marks from when the first one was born here in my hand. But the beauty of what went on in there, the hope and the expectation of, because back when my children were born, they didn't tell you whether you had a girl or boy. They couldn't even really tell you whether it was healthy or not. I mean, they could do some sonograms, they could do some things like that, but they weren't really all that clear. I mean, you could see this blob with, something, and they say, oh, yeah, that's the baby. And I'm like, oh, okay, sure. But, it starts out slowly. For my wife, it started out, she'd have a kind of feeling like something was going on, and then it would go away. And then a few minutes to a few hours later, kind of something, and, it'd go away. And all that did was heighten that in me that said, I can't do this. I can't wait. I'm not patient. But I had that hope for something at the end. We all hope for a perfect baby. 10 fingers, 10 toes, breathes good, screams at you all the time, got stuff running out of both ends. That's what we hope for. And most of the time we get that. But as the husband standing in there, the dad watching when that doctor pulled the baby, cut the cord and handed it to my wife and says, you have a beautiful baby girl. I could have exploded. If there'd have been internet and Facebook and whatever else there is now that I'm not a part of, I would have had stuff everywhere. It was so much fun to be in there for me, but so stressful. Waiting patiently is not my thing. Waiting patiently wasn't the Romans' thing either. These folks that Paul was writing to wanted things to happen now. They wanted to know what was going to go on, and he's saying, no, you've got to wait patiently. Yeah, it's painful right now. If the Roman soldiers find out you're a Christian, they're going to come and torture you and kill you. I understand that. But hope for what has been promised. That better life that Jesus has promised you. Hope for that. Be there, be ready. Well, can you imagine just even partially what it would be like for those Romans to be told by Paul, hey, hang on. Wait patiently. Because that hope that Jesus has given you is coming. I'm not sure I could have. You see, that hope that Paul gave them was certain. He knew it was coming. He knew that that was coming for them. Well, Dr. Nelson again tells us that it's easy while sitting in the waiting room of this world to lose sight of what we're waiting for, to focus on the suffering and the struggles of this life so that we forget what it is we're waiting for. It's good for us to pause and think about the glorious life of heaven. We thank God for our fellow Christians for whom the wait is over. And you've lost some good friends from this congregation even in the last year. It's tough. It's hard. But know that they have gone to a much, much better place. We thank God that He has already sent us the results. He's shown us the truly glorious outcome of all this waiting, which strengthens us in our struggles and our sufferings. You see, He's given us a glorious life. We thank God for teaching us how to wait patiently with the sure hope of a life in heaven. Amen.